In her past life, Gu Mingyue was Princess Chen, an invincible female general, and the unparalleled king of Xiang and Chu. Unfortunately, people's hearts are fickle, and the most ruthless is the imperial family. 7 years of rainy marching brought about the fate of robbing families and exterminating families, and 10,000 arrows piercing through the heart and dying. Hell is too cold, no one has died for her, she never closes her eyes. After 3 years of rebirth, she became the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family, Jiang, who had undergone extensive trials and tribulations. He Lianquan defeated her, and she killed him. If this world loses her, she will overthrow this world. On the path of supreme imperial power, she has no regrets when leaving. She kills gods and ghosts when encountering them. Unfortunately, as soon as she was reborn, she met the sick seedling Shan and was picked up. The former sick beauty crown prince has grown into a noble young man with a cold heart and black hands. The two of them are fighting each other, wishing to strangle each other every day. Jiang. Sick seedling, sooner or later I will make you kneel down and call your aunt. Shan. Come here, let me teach you how to be a ghost. Later more and more people are coveting her. Shan began to go crazy and walked down the altar. He said, "The 14 provinces of Yunmeng are a gift, and this crown prince has come to marry you." Chapter 1. Hell is too cold, no one dies for her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gu Mingyue, if you dare to take a step forward, I will destroy your entire family and execute your 9 clans. Gu Mingyue stopped and a drop of blood splattered onto her face. She looked up at the gloomy sky and remembered the almanac she had read before fleeing today. On June 17th, there is great calamity, and all things are not suitable. At the age of 15, He Lianquan first met her on the Mid-Autumn Festival. At the age of 16, he knelt in front of the Buddha for 3 days and 3 nights for her seriously ill. At the age of 17, she married him with 10 miles of red makeup and became Princess Chen. At the age of 19, a man from all over the Gu family died in battle with his body wrapped in a horseshoe. At the age of 20, she became the sharp sword in his hand, armor him, and fight invincibly through thorns and thorns. At the age of 20.2, he took her life. 7 years of wind and rain, 7 years of companionship, in exchange for the fate of robbing the family and exterminating the family. Today, the last person around her also died because of her, and she finally became a lonely family. Gu Mingyue slowly turned back and looked at He Lianquan, who was dressed in a white battle robe and handsome, not far away. My Gu family has all died because of you, and you will be punished. As soon as she finished speaking, arrows flew through the air, piercing through her heart with 10,000 arrows. Gu Mingyue covered her chest and slowly knelt on the ground. Who asked you to shoot the arrows? He Lianquan dismounted and walked up to her, bending down to wipe away the blood from the corners of her mouth. Do you plead guilty? Gu Mingyue looked up and smiled at him, then suddenly lifted a golden hairpin and stabbed it into his chest. You go to hell. Helian Xian kicked her 3 meters away, and the blood under her turned red on the blue slate. Gu Mingyue opened her eyes wide, and 2 lines of blood and tears slowly flowed down. Helian Xian, even if I were a ghost, I wouldn't let you go. I want you to be doomed, to be repaid with blood. The weather in June suddenly snowed heavily, and Gu Mingyue's eyes couldn't close no matter how hard she tried. Hell is too cold, no one has died for her, she dies with her eyes closed. On the disorderly burial mound. Gu Mingyue woke up in a daze, with a headache that was unbearable, and her hands and feet were weak and unable to move at all. She seemed to be carried on her shoulder, swaying and bumping, making her feel nauseous. San Yang, should we dig a pit and bury her? Humph, why waste that energy? Just throw it away. Bang! She was thrown directly onto the ground and rolled down the slope into a pit, feeling as if her whole body had fallen apart and in excruciating pain. Gu Mingyue let out a painful snort, hissed San Yang, I think I heard something. Don't be so suspicious and scary. Gu Mingyue, who was wrapped in the grass mat, felt a stir in her heart and said, Wu-woo-ee woo-woo-hoo jiao. The two people on the hillside looked at each other in fear and said, there's a ghost. Screaming and running away. In the extreme pain, Gu Mingyue's thoughts slowly cleared up and she struggled to pinch her thigh, causing her teeth to tremble. She's still alive. What's going on? Did she not die completely and be thrown to the mass grave by He Lianxuan? Gu Mingyue lay in place for a while, waiting for the pain on her body to ease before struggling to crawl out of the grass mat. She sat up and looked around. Good guy, looking around, the ground is covered in bones and corpses are everywhere. She even lay on a white bone, making a clicking sound when she moved. She was startled and silently recited, there is no Amitabha Buddha in the south, and those who do not know are innocent. Her gaze was quickly drawn to the corpse on the left, which was a newly married woman dressed in a red wedding dress with a damp complexion, looking as if she had just died. Gu Mingyue reached out and pulled off something from her waist, red beans and exquisite dice. How could it be here? Someone was rushing forward at lightning speed, and she calmly hid the linglong dice with her backhand in her bones. Just put away, a long sword was placed around her neck, and the chill emanating from it made her shiver. A group of people in black surrounded her. The man led by him has eyes like cold stars, a pale color like water, and a cold like frost on a winter night. Gu Mingyue blinked her eyes. Isn't this Shan Zhaoyan, the sick seedling of the Shan family? Why is he here? He has grown quite a bit taller. The eyes of the sick young man scanned her like frozen ice, and the black-clothed man led by him spoke, Who are you? What are you doing here? Gu Mingyue waved her hands and stroked, Ah. The man in black frowned and said, Is he a mute? The woman in black carefully examined the newlywed beside her from head to toe and said, She has nothing on her body. Did you take it? The sword of the man in black approached her neck. Gu Mingyue waved her hand in terror and said, Ah. Take the body away, let's kill this little mute, said the sick seedling. Finally Gu Mingyue's chest was filled with blood and gas, and a mouthful of fresh blood spurted out before slowly collapsing. This is her unique method of holding her breath, which can disguise the image of feigning death. Dead. Shan Zhaoyan said coldly, Go up and check. Gu Mingyue was searched all over her body, and the female subordinate even tried her breathing. It's really dead, she said. Shan Zhaoyan scrutinized her, always feeling that this little mute gave a strange feeling, hesitating whether to pick up her body together. The crown prince, hurry up. They are catching up. The man in black protected Shan Zhaoyan behind him. A group of people began to retreat. As they passed by Gu Mingyue's body, Shan Zhaoyan, for some reason, reached out and kicked her. Gu Mingyue. Not even a dead person is spared. After a few minutes, the technique malfunctioned. Gu Mingyue woke up leisurely. She didn't dare to make a big move and cautiously opened a slit in her eyes, burying two groups of people on the mound in a lively battle. With a puff sound, she watched helplessly as a person fell in front of her with their necks smeared, blood splattering all over her face. Gu Mingyue quickly closed her eyes and continued to pretend to be dead. Shan Zhaoyan, you sick seedling, should stay well in the capital. If you dare to meddle in Tongzhou, don't blame me for taking your life. The Liu family privately embezzled disaster relief silver and colluded with foreign tribes, which is the crime of punishing the 9 ethnic groups. The amount of information is too large, and Gu Mingyue is confused. What about Tongzhou and the Liu family? She remembers that she was shot dead by an arrow piercing her heart outside the imperial city. Why did she open her eyes and run to Tongzhou? She had already noticed that something was wrong with her body and she didn't have any internal strength. Is it possible that she was possessed by a ghost? Before she could figure it out, she was stomped on her hand, causing a heart-wrenching pain. She gritted her mouth tightly before making a sound. A cold hand grabbed her neck, and Gu Mingyue clenched her fist in her right hand. No big deal, fish die and the net is broken. Shen Zhaoyan watched her movements with a cold expression in his eyes. They were almost deceived by a little mute, but they really know how to pretend. If it weren't for the wrong timing, he would have taught her how to be a ghost. Shen Zhaoyan slowly tightened his hand around her neck and said, "Dumb, when I come back to find you. If you dare to run, I will break your legs and strip you of your muscles and skin." Just as Gu Mingyue felt about to suffocate, the hand around her neck suddenly loosened. A group of people roared past her, and the mass grave quickly quieted down. Gu Mingyue slowly opened her eyes. Who said that the sick seedling had a skin bag and was weak and unable to take care of herself? Chapter 2. 3 years later, Rebirth at the Burial Hill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wow, wow. The gloomy weather, the chirping of crows, and the roaring strong wind make this cemetery appear eerie and terrifying. Gu Mingyue struggled to sit up and looked around in confusion. There is a sense of absurdity that one does not know what year this evening is. She looked down at her black and thin hands, like chicken feet, and her tattered clothes, which were definitely not her own body. A sudden sharp pain hit her mind, and she fell to the ground, with many images flashing through her mind. Originally, this body was named Jiang Xuening, the legitimate daughter of Jiangzhou, the imperial censor of Jiangnan, and also her cousin. After she died, her aunt was heartbroken and quickly died of illness. The Jiang family was afraid of being implicated, so they sent Jiang Xuening to the manor in Tongzhou thousands of miles away overnight. For the past 3 years, without caring about Jiang Xuening, she has suffered a lot of hardships in the village. This morning, he was trapped in a pond and drowned alive, and then thrown into a mass grave. Before the little girl died, in the icy and piercing water, her last thought was that if only her cousin were still alive. My mother once said that my cousin is the most powerful woman in the world, so no one dares to bully her. Gu Mingyue lay on the ground, feeling heartbroken and unable to breathe. She used too much force to prick her fingernails and cut through her palm. Her little cousin didn't grow up well, it was she who indirectly caused her death. She Gu Mingyue, the sin is deep. From now on, there will be no more Gu Mingyue in the world. She will be Jiang Xuening, coming for revenge. He Lianchuan defeated her, and she killed him. If this world loses her, she will overthrow this world. Jiang Xuening's eyes burst with a chilling hatred. Hellion Xian, I wonder if you've been sleeping soundly for the past 3 years. If she can push him onto the dragon chair, she can pull him down. Hatred was raging, and Jiang Ningxue's mind was unstable. Qi and blood surged up, and she vomited out a mouthful of blood with a loud sound, her mind wandering. I don't know how long it took, but Shen Zhaoyan, who had already left, returned with his people. He looked at Jiang Xuening sitting quietly on the bones with his head down. He poked her shoulder with his unsheathed sword and said, "Are you dead or alive?" Jiang Xuening opened her eyes and reflexively grabbed the long sword. "Even if you're alive, you'll have to poke me to death." Shen Zhaoyan looked at her from a high position and said, "Hand over the things, otherwise don't blame my sword for being unsheathed." Jiang Xuening lowered her eyes and pretended to be foolish. Just as she was about to speak, her chest froze. Wow, a big mouthful of blood spurted out. Shen Zhaoyan retreated in disgust and continued to stab her viciously with his sword. You have to pretend to be dead again, right? If you have the ability, you can take another sip and see. Poochie. Jiang Xuening spat out again. At one point, the scene was somewhat eerie. In the chaotic burial mound covered in bones, only her face was covered in blood and her clothes were dyed red. Jiang Xuening looked up and tugged at the corners of her mouth, showing a strange smile. She was about to pretend to be mischievous when she fainted. What will the crown prince do? Shen Zhaoyan walked over and kicked her twice, but there was no response. Stay here and feed the wild dogs, he said the thing hidden in her bones was quickly found, and Shan Zhaoyan looked at the beautiful and small dice in his hand, his eyes flashing with surprise. Oops oops! Not far away came the howling of wolves, coupled with the eerie atmosphere of the chaotic burial mound, giving people an ominous feeling. Go back. Shan Zhaoyan lifted his foot and was about to leave, only to find himself caught. He stared at the hand that grabbed his robe, black and thin like a dead wood. This kind of hand is really unsightly. It will break off with a gentle fold, right? He tugged at his clothes and took off Jiang Xuaning's hand, without hesitation turning around and leaving. Jiang Xuaning endured heartache and looked up with difficulty. She absolutely couldn't just die here like this, with an astonishing will to survive bursting out in an instant. You can't break it. That red bean dice player. A very weak sentence successfully made Shan Zhaoyan stop. He turned back abruptly and looked at her with a poisoned expression. You really know what this is? Jiang Xuaning lay on the ground in a disheveled state, without speaking. Shan Zhaoyan walked over and grabbed her hair, forcefully pulling it back to force her to look up. Who the hell are you? The name of this thing is not something that a country girl can know. The ruthless playfulness dared to treat her like this. She shouldn't have been deceived by his appearance in the beginning. Save him. Jiang Xuaning despised him fiercely in her heart, pretending to be pitiful. Tears streamed down her eyes. Please help me. As she spoke, she reached out and tried to grab the clothes on his chest. Shan Zhaoyan warned her, if you dare to move, I'll break your wrist. Jiang Xuaning's hands stiffened in mid-air, enduring the scorching pain of her scalp and crying pitifully. Shan Zhaoyan remained unmoved and said, I won't save useless people. She passed out with a blank eye. Shan Zhaoyan, who had already been deceived by her, didn't believe it at all and forcefully pinched her face without any response. Bad luck. Shan Zhaoyan let go of her and wiped his hands with the handkerchief handed over by his subordinate. On the mass grave, crows and wild dogs are already starting to eat. They are gnawing on the bones and making a living from decaying flesh. That group of wild dogs probably grew strong and tall because they didn't lack meat to eat. While eating, he was staring at them with fierce eyes. As soon as they leave, Jiang Xuaning will inevitably become the dinner of these wild dogs. I have already picked up a corpse today, and I don't mind picking up another one to the end. Let's just use poison to fight poison. Shan Zhaoyan said in a low voice, take her body away. The subordinates walked over and roughly carried Jiang Xuaning on their shoulders, and a group of people quickly disappeared into the mass grave. At mid-moon, they finally returned to the courtyard where they had settled. The subordinate slammed her to the ground and asked, Crown Prince, was she buried or dismembered? Shan Zhaoyan took out the linglong red bean dice, but no matter how hard he tried or how hard he twisted it, he couldn't open it and didn't move even when he used a knife to chop. This thing is too sturdy, isn't it? Shan Zhaoyan chuckled lightly and said, it's true that it comes from the Mahist school, which is famous for its mechanism techniques. External forces can't easily break it. Not many people know about this thing, and if they really want to unravel it, they probably rely on this corpse on the ground. This is the biggest reason why he picks up corpses. If he can't solve it, he will let her experience the feeling of throwing ashes at her bones. Bai Zhu was forcibly pulled over from the bed and yawned, what are you doing in the middle of the night? See if this body has been saved, Shan Zhaoyan said calmly. You can still be saved if you are dead. Don't tease me. While roast, Bai Zhu took out a silver needle and stabbed it down. Stimulated, Jiang Xuaning suddenly sat up straight and fell down again. Bai Zhu touched his chin and smiled, oh, you really pretended to be a corpse. Shan Zhaoyan coughed pale and said, I don't care what method you use, I want to see her wake up tomorrow. Don't worry, I'm a professional in faking corpses, Bai Zhu confidently assured. Jiang Xuaning, the corpse, was dragged into the pharmacy of Atractylodes macrocephala and tossed and turned into a medicinal man by various trials and tribulations. Since Shan Zhaoyan said it was a corpse, it meant that this person was no different from dead in his eyes, so he didn't show any mercy under the spell. Chapter 3. She is a fish and meat, a knife and a dock. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ouch. Bai Zhu gave her hand a quick, precise and ruthless injection, and Jiang Xuaning spat out a large mouthful of dirty blood before slowly waking up. She leaned weakly against the bed and asked in a hoarse voice, "What's wrong with me? First, there was food poisoning and drowning, and you were already dead." Bai Zhu fooled her with a wicked joke, "You have been picked up and come back now. You must listen well." Without waiting for her answer, Bai Zhu forcefully poured her a large bowl of bitter medicine and then left her aside, too lazy to pay attention. Jiang Xuaning leaned on the bed to recover her energy and sort out the sequence of things. Before she could organize her thoughts, the door to the pharmacy was pushed open. Shan Zhaoyan, dressed in white and proud, walked in and gave her a cold glance. "You're really lucky, you're still alive. Hurry up and get out of here." Cough cough. Jiang Xuaning coughed with saliva. "Damn it, the older you get, the less adorable you become." When she first asked for help, it was clearly a young and beautiful young master who was sick and weak. She rarely showed compassion and meddled in his affairs, saving him once. Now it seems that it has completely grown crooked. The promised one will grow into a delicate and beautiful young man, and it will definitely grow into a little wolf cub. Under the eaves, people had to bow their heads. Jiang Xuaning felt regretful in her heart and walked over honestly with her body. Due to being too weak, when he was still 2 steps away, his legs softened and he knelt to the ground with a thud. She awkwardly wanted to burrow into the crevice and stood up gritting her teeth as if nothing had happened. A pale and slender hand pressed against her shoulder and forcefully pushed her down. Shan Zhaoyan looked at her with a smile on his face and said, "The kneeling position is very beautiful. Let's continue kneeling." Jiang Xuaning lowered her eyes, covering her murderous intent. The person who dares to make her kneel down is still the first. It seems that the little pitiful person back then had hard wings. Shan Zhaoyan threw the brightly colored linglong dice in his hand in front of her and said, "Open it, or I'll kill you." The young master's attitude toward seeking help is not right, is it? Jiang Xuaning looked up at him with a pair of apricot eyes that were clearly black and white. "I opened it, what's the benefit?" This kind of gaze is not what a rural girl should have, and Shan Zhaoyan increasingly doubts her identity. "Dare to negotiate terms with me?" Shan Zhaoyan held her chin in disdain, and the cold tip of his knife brushed against her cheek. "If you don't listen, I'll peel off your skin and make a lantern." Jiang Xuaning looked at him fearlessly and said, "You can give it a try. If I die, unless you find the ruler of the Mahist school, no one in this world can open the linglong dice." Shen Zhaozi's murderous intent was revealed in an instant, and the knife in his hand approached Jiang Xuaning's neck, causing a bloody scratch with force. "I hate being threatened by others the most." Jiang Xuaning's eyes stiffened, and she suddenly jumped up from the ground. The blade in her hand quickly attacked him, and she smiled sweetly. "It's really clever, so am I." The white magic on the side silently watched the battle. It had been a long time since they encountered such a tough bone. "You can try and see whose knife is faster," Shan Zhaoyan chuckled lightly. Jiang Xuaning certainly knows that she is not his opponent, but she cannot retreat or show fear. People like Shan Zhaoyan, when she shows a weak expression, will take the opportunity to pounce and bite her to death. Shan Zhaoyan kicked her knee with one foot, grabbed her wrist with the other, and snapped with a snap. The blade in her hand fell off in response, and she knelt on one knee with a cold snort. This body has no internal strength, is still weak, and has no resistance at all. Jiang Xuaning's cold sweat broke out in pain, and she didn't regret taking action because she only wanted an opportunity to negotiate terms. Shan Zhaoyan finally spoke up and asked, "Tell me, who the hell are you?" "My name is Jiang Xuaning." Shan Zhaoyan looked at the ugly girl in front of him, who was black and thin, and made sure he had never heard of the name. To be more specific, he said, the legitimate daughter of Jiangzhou, the imperial censor of Jiangnan. Jiang Xuaning wiped the blood from her mouth. She is also Gu Mingyue's cousin. As expected, when the three words, Gu Mingyue, were uttered, Shan Zhaoyan's pupils trembled and he said with an unclear meaning, so it's her cousin, no wonder it's so difficult to deal with. How could the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family appear at the mass grave? Shan Zhaoyan continued to scrutinize her suspiciously, and she's so ugly. Your cousin was a famous beauty in Xinjiang back then. Jiang Xuaning's expression was indifferent. After my cousin died, my mother also died. I was thrown to Zhuangzi by the Jiang family and drowned again yesterday. This demeanor and arrogance do indeed have a hint of Gu Mingyue's former charm. Shan Zhaoyan said with a venomous tongue, oh, she's both blind and foolish. She made someone else's wedding dress for nothing. Jiang Xuaning listened to Shan Zhaoyan's roast with an expressionless face. She sharpened her knife and asked him to kneel down one day to call her sister. Since you are her cousin, you obediently open the Linglong dice and I'll save your life. Shan Zhaoyan played with the knife in his hand with his fingers. If you're too greedy, I'll make you a real corpse. Shan Zhaoyan's smile made her feel chilly, and she felt a bit crazy about her. She is a victim of fish and meat, and she has taken this loss today. She must repay it twice the next day. She governs crazy criticism. Jiang Xuaning bent down and picked up the red bean Linglong dice on the ground. She limped to the window and raised the Linglong dice to carefully examine the sun. Shan Zhaoyan stared at her with a cold expression, his gaze fixed on the position of her heart. If she does anything wrong, he will definitely make her blood splatter 3 feet. Can you really open it, and how long will it be delayed? Shan Zhaoyan urged. Jiang Xuaning put down her hand, lowered her head, and quickly twisted the Linglong dice in her hand, moving so fast that almost a shadow appeared. Shan Zhaoyan couldn't see her movements clearly and unconsciously held his breath. Jiang Xuaning raised the Linglong dice in her hand and said, all right, it's open. This move is so impressive, Bai Zhu couldn't help but sigh. Shan Zhaoyan leaned back on the chair and said in a very grandiose voice, bring it over. Jiang Xuaning smiled at his gaze and released her hand in an instant. The note in the Linglong dice fell to the ground. She smiled innocently and said, I'm sorry, my hand hurts and I can't hold it steady. Shan Zhaoyan raised his eyebrows and walked up to her, looking down at her from a high position. You have a lot of courage, do you think I really won't kill you? You will regret killing me. Jiang Xuaning looked up at him and said, and you owe my cousin 1 life. Now is the time for you to pay off your debt. I owe her, not you, Shan Zhaoyan reminded her. So is the crown prince planning to go to hell to return my cousin? Jiang Xuaning asked knowingly. It's been a long time since I've seen such a prickly person. Shan Zhaoyan grabbed her neck and said, then I'll take you down first. Jiang Xuaning remained silent, her gaze becoming deeper. Shan Zhaoyan saw in her eyes unwillingness, anger, murderous intent, and hatred. At a young age with such a gaze, he knew in that moment that he had met his own kind. Shan Zhaoyan let go and prepared to save her life. The world is too boring, he wants to see what she really wants to do. Chapter 4. Night of Murder with Black Moon and High Wind. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After that day, Jiang Xuaning was tacitly allowed to stay to recuperate. Shan Zhaoyan appeared and disappeared, not knowing what he was doing, and disappeared all day. She searched through the pharmacy of Atractylodes macrocephala while resting, and effortlessly walked a bottle of colorless and tasteless medicine from his cabinet. She deftly carried things in her arms and walked out silently with her head down. Bai Wei and Shan Zhaoyan were on the 2nd floor, watching as she slipped out. The little thing is a bit interesting, staring at my poison every day, unsure of who to harm. Shan Zhaoyan instructed the person beside him, Xiao Shi, follow up and keep an eye on it. If there is anything wrong, execute it on the spot. After leaving the house, Jiang Xuaning found that she didn't know the way at all. Randomly grabbing an old lady, she timidly asked, "Auntie, how can I get to Qinghe village?" Auntie saw that it was a thin and weak little girl, and enthusiastically gave her directions. Jiang Xuaning asked for directions while walking towards Qinghe village. Zhuang Tu Zhou Daming and Li Sanyang killed the real Jiang Xuaning, and she naturally wants to seek revenge for her. Since she has taken over this body and will be Jiang Xuaning from now on, she will also take over the grudges and blood debts of this body. For 3 years, Jiang Xuaning woke up earlier than a chicken, slept later than a dog, and worked more than a donkey on the farm. Diligent and hard-working, often being greeted by the couples, stir-fried meat with bamboo shoots. So this person's physical fitness was quite good, and she quickly drove back to Qinghe village after dark. The village was extremely quiet, except for the occasional barking of dogs. Everyone fell asleep. Jiang Xuaning skillfully reached back to the Zhou family based on her memory, with the door locked tightly. She found a piece of wire nearby, quickly opened the lock, and tiptoed into the kitchen. I successfully found the water tank to drain in the corner of the kitchen. She drank half a ladle of water herself to quench her thirst, took out a bottle from her arms, and poured a few colorless and tasteless drops of medicine into the water. Then he reached back into the original owner's room and pulled out a special bracelet from the tattered straw mat based on his memory. This was left by Mrs. Jiang to her daughter before her death, and she reminded the original owner to keep it hidden. Jiang Xuaning suspects that this bracelet has a special purpose. After finishing everything, Jiang Xuaning slipped out of the Zhou family again, restored the door lock to its original state, went to the back mountain to find a safe place, and lay down to sleep. The next day, Li Sanyang woke up cursing amidst the crowing of roosters and went to the kitchen to start cooking. The life of the Zhou family has always been good. Li Sanyang scooped 2 large ladles of water from the water tank and put them into the pot, preparing to make a noodle soup. She yawned while burning the fire and said, "I'm not used to that girl's free calling for a while." The woman who had done some work quickly finished breakfast and served 2 large bowls of green onion soup on the table. The couple started eating big mouthfuls, and Li Sanyang's chest felt a bit tight. "I dreamt of that dead girl last night, and I always feel uneasy," she said. Zhou Daming said nonchalantly, "She's already dead. Don't daydream. Is it possible that she will really turn into a ghost and come back?" "I'm not afraid of ghosts." 2 large bowls of lump soup were quickly consumed, and the 2 of them were satisfied with hiccups, planning how to spend the 200 taels of silver they had in hand. Ouch! Li Sanyang covered her stomach and let out a mournful cry, starting to foam at the mouth. Zhou Daming was convulsing all over, his hands trembling as if he had gone crazy with chicken feet. Did the ghost really get on her body? Li Sanyang felt both pain and fear. The 2 of them crawled towards the door, desperately shouting for help, but unfortunately their voices were weak and there were no farmers around them. With a creak, the door was pushed open. Jiang Xuaning walked in against the morning sunlight and stood at the door, showing a bloodthirsty smile to the 2 of them. Li Sanyang was so scared that she lost her heart and went crazy. She hugged her head and shouted, "Ghost, ghost. You have a head full of grievances and debts, and you have a master. Don't come over." Jiang Xuaning walked over and grabbed Li Sanyang's hair, pulling her head up. "Who made you kill me? It has been 3 years now, and they cannot suddenly attack the original owner for no reason. There must be a reason." Her words seemed to strike a taboo, and although Li Sanyang's eyes were full of fear, she gritted her teeth and remained silent. Jiang Xuaning let go of her and stood up, clapping her hands. "I poisoned you. If you don't say it, in half an hour, you will die through your intestines and stomach." The 2 of them did experience increasing pain, especially as their stomachs seemed to be bitten by thousands of ants, causing them to roll around in pain. Zhou Daming cursed loudly, "Little slut, how dare you treat me like this? Madam won't let you go." Jiang Xuaning walked over and stepped on his hand, crushing it hard. There's still strength to curse, it seems like it's not painful enough. She picked up a nearby stool and lifted it high, smashing it onto Zhou Daming. He was instantly bleeding and unable to speak. Jiang Xuaning acted too harshly, and Li Sanyang beside her was so scared that she wet her pants. She twisted and tried to escape while begging for mercy. "Xiao Ning, we are also forced to do nothing. Please let us go." Jiang Xuaning picked up the teapot on the table and said, "If you don't say anything, I'll smash it." Li Sanyang closed her eyes and said obediently, it was second madam who instructed me. As expected, she is the current wife of Jiangzhou. I don't know what's blocking her way, so she used such a cruel hand on a little girl." Upon receiving a satisfactory answer, Jiang Xuaning strode out of the room, ignoring the two of them who were painfully lying on the ground. She piled firewood and laid hay in every corner of the house and yard, and it was already afternoon after finishing her work. She entered the bedroom of the two again and scraped away all the silver and valuable things inside. There were about 500 or 600 tales of blood that the two of them had drawn from her over the years, and she took it without any mercy. By the time she returned to the kitchen, the two had already lost their breath and were in excruciating pain. She waited until it was dark and almost everyone in the village was asleep before setting fire to the entire house. Jiang Xuaning quickly climbed up the back mountain and stood there watching the entire house be engulfed by the fire. She touched her heart and said, "Rest in peace, I will definitely avenge you." She will gradually recover the enmity between the Gu family and Jiang Xuaning, and no one can escape. She rested on the mountain for another night and took advantage of the light to reach out to the village before rushing back. As soon as he returned, Xiao Shi, who was waiting for the rabbit, grabbed his collar and pulled him in front of Shen Zhaoyan. Shen Zhaoyan smelled the faint smell of blood on her body and knowingly asked, "What did you do?" Jiang Xuaning, exhausted from running back and forth, sat down and drank a glass of water for herself. She said confidently, "Oh, I killed someone while the moon was dark and the wind was high." Being so direct and honest, Shen Zhaoyan was somewhat surprised. TSK, being so ruthless at such a young age has a promising future, said Bai Zhu with a strange expression on the side. Jiang Xuaning didn't care either and said with a smile, "Those who are barefoot are not afraid of wearing shoes. They are all bullying me. Of course, I can't be cowardly. Laughing really ugly, it's cruel to look at ugly people." Shen Zhaoyan sneered, "Ugly girl, are you very proud? You're laughing so ugly." Jiang Xuaning. I really want to blow up his dog head. Chapter 5. Touching porcelain. She is professional. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Do you want to go back to the Jiang family? Think about it. Shen Zhaoyan showed a satisfied expression and elegantly threw a note to her. Jiang Xuaning glanced at it and saw that it was exactly the day she took it out of the Linglong dice. There is only one sentence above. The ledger and list are in the Zhou family. Shen Zhaoyan knocked on the table and said, "Go into the Zhou family and help me get the account book and list, and I'll take you back to the Jiang family." "Yo, can't I make sure I have a request from her?" Jiang Xuaning trembled in an instant and raised her chin, "You owe me once and ask me to bring it up later." Shen Zhaoyan squinted his eyes and said, "Let's talk when you can get something." The legitimate daughter of the Lu family married into the Zhou family, and the account books should have been sent with the dowry. They arrived one step late and only found the body of the Lu family daughter at the mass grave. A year ago, due to the severe drought, the people in Tongzhou were struggling and corpses were scattered everywhere. The emperor allocated 500,000 taels of silver for disaster relief, but it led to the embezzlement of the disaster silver by the governor of Tongzhou, Lu Wan, which involved a large number of forces. Jiang Xuaning asked, "How do I get into the Zhou family?" Shen Zhaoyan looked up and down at her, his gaze fixed on her chicken coop head. "This is still quite easy for you, little beggar." The next day, Jiang Xuaning was dressed in tattered clothes, with a smudged face and hair tied in explosive knots, complemented by her emaciated complexion. The leader of the beggars' sect has arrived, and everyone should call out their profession. They have fully mastered the essence and are the elite disciples of their beggars' sect. Shen Zhaoyan stood away from her in disgust and said, "When you fall later, remember to fall more seriously and don't cheat or slip. If you don't speak, no one will consider you mute." Jiang Xuaning pursed her ear. Xiao Shi, who was looking for the wind, flew back with a light posture and used his lightness skills. "People are here, prepare quickly," he said. Jiang Xuaning's eyes were cold, and she had already flashed 180 different positions of holding her thighs in her heart. Today is the 15th day, and it has been a tumultuous autumn recently. Mrs. Zhou is feeling uneasy and came to the temple to offer incense and worship the gods. She also asked for a visa. The maid helped her onto the carriage, which had just taken a few steps. A little beggar rushed out from the side and fell in front of the carriage. Just 2 steps away, the horse's hooves are stepping on her. The groom came to a sudden stop and the car shook. Mrs. Zhou was startled and lifted the curtain of the car. I saw a strong man holding a whip and cursing as he chased after her. He raised his hand and whipped her, saying, "Little slut, how dare you run? I'll see if I don't kill you." Jiang Xuaning trembled with pain. What she had agreed on was just acting. "In my heart, I have cursed Shen Zhaoyan's ancestors for 18 generations, and they have grown up like dogs and are ruthless in their actions." As the second whip was about to come down, she crawled forward and said, "Help, help." The strong man chased after him relentlessly, and all the pilgrims around him looked over. The guards of the Zhou family were also startled and surrounded. The strong man grabbed her chicken coop and grinned, "Excuse me, madam. The children at home are not obedient. I'll take them back now." Jiang Xuaning looked at Mrs. Zhou with teary eyes and shouted, "It's not like that, he's lying. I was taken by him, he wants to sell me to the brothel." To be calm, Mrs. Zhou will never interfere with such trivial matters. But today this happened at the feet of the Buddha outside the temple, and with the draw she just drew, the high monk who released the draw said that she should do more good deeds and accumulate virtue recently. Mrs. Zhou's mind twitched and she said to the guard beside her, in broad daylight, "Someone is forcing a good woman into prostitution. Take her to the government." As soon as the strong man saw that he had kicked the iron plate, he immediately turned around and ran. Jiang Xuaning kowtowed in gratitude, "Thank you very much, madam, for saving her life." Mrs. Zhou looked at her with a kind expression and said, "Which family's child are you from? I'll have someone take you back. My parents starved to death in last year's drought, and I was already homeless." Jiang Xuaning was so engrossed in the performance that she cried and hiccuped pitifully. "You can come back with me first." Mrs. Zhou showed great kindness. Her attire was a bit too harsh, and even the maids and women on the carriage didn't want to sit with her. "Where did that little beggar come from?" "He's so dirty," said a maid disdainfully. "Madam is just too kind." Jiang Xuaning lowered her head and looked cramped, trembling and hesitant to speak. She was as honest as a quail. "Can you be dishonest?" The old lady next to Mrs. Zhou was scanning her with sharp eyes, her eyes as wide as those of a cow. She buried her head in confusion and was taken into the Zhou mansion. "When I got off the car, I made a joke and almost knelt down with my legs weak." Li Mama took her directly to an empty room and looked at her with fiery eyes, "Take it off." Jiang Xuaning hesitated for a moment and quickly reacted, shaking her hands and tightening her clothes. She stepped back in fear, "I'm obedient, please let me go." This performance was very close to her portrayal as a persecuted girl, and Li Mama's expression softened for a moment. "Don't be afraid, come over and I'll check your injuries." In the end, she saved her clothes, and Li Mama only lifted them for a slight inspection and carefully examined her hands and feet. Li Mama washed her hands to ensure that she didn't have any strange smell from the barking flowers before entering the room to reply. Mrs. Zhou held a string of Buddhist beads in her hand and said, "Is there anything unusual?" Although she brought people back because of the words of the high monks in the temple, the Zhou family was in a sensitive period, and once they found something wrong, she would not be soft-hearted. She is thin and skinny, with old wounds on her body, calluses left from years of work on her hands, and blisters on her feet from walking too many times. Her accent does indeed have a hint of a rural accent, which basically matches her background and doesn't seem like she's pretending, Li Mama replied clearly. Some things are easy to disguise, while others are difficult. You can see through it at a glance when you meet someone who knows the way. This is also why Shan Zhaoyan insisted on using Jiang Xuaning to carry out this task, leaving the people around him unused. After 3 years of torment in Qinghe village, the marks on Jiang Xuaning's body do not lie, perfectly fitting the image of a little pitiful person. Mrs. Zhou said in a calm tone, "Then leave her behind and arrange any task. Don't let her enter the inner courtyard." Jiang Xuaning was taken to take a bath and changed into the clothes of a maid from the Zhou family, looking still shabby because she was black and thin. Li Mama asked, "What can you do?" Jiang Xuaning timidly said, "I can cook. I've been cooking for my family since I was 5 years old." Li Mama thought for a moment, but the people in the kitchen didn't have much chance to enter the inner courtyard, so she waved her hand and sent Jiang Xuaning to the kitchen. Jiang Xuaning was taken to the kitchen and handed over to the kitchen steward. The steward looked at her with disdain, thinking that she couldn't work as thin as a little chicken. "What's your name?" "My name is Xiaoju," Jiang Xuaning said thoughtfully. "Thanks to my wife saving me today. Even if it's a cat in my wife's house, it's still more precious." The steward's attitude immediately improved by 2 points, since it was the person saved by the wife, then you can stay and work hard. Jiang Xuaning officially started working and became a maid in the kitchen of the Zhou family. Chapter 6. Throwing a small note. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Jiang Xuaning is like a fish in water in the kitchen, able to eat and work, quiet and honest, neither threatening nor easy to handle. She quickly became a fire maid in the kitchen and was instructed to run errands everywhere when she didn't start a fire. When the kitchen maids gossip, they don't even hesitate about her. Adding the information about the Zhou family that Shan Zhaoyan had imparted to him before she came in, as well as the layout of the inner house, she quickly figured out the situation. No one is more dedicated than her, burning a fire during the day and walking at night. She was suddenly thrown over, looking both shabby and shabby. At first, she was ostracized and had no place to live, so the kitchen steward's mother decided to let her live in the woodshed, which was exactly what she wanted. After finishing her day of arson today, she went out for a walk as usual in the quiet of the night. Having fully memorized the map of the Zhou mansion, as well as the routes of the night patrolling guards and the old lady, she evaded easily, like a slippery fish shuttling through the mansion. According to the information provided by Shan Zhaoyan, she has basically locked the position of the ledger, mostly in Mr. Zhou's study. The problem is that the outside of the study is loose and the inside is tight. Although it seems unguarded, the few maids inside the study are actually experts. It wouldn't have been a problem for her before, but now her body is far from good. She turned into the peach blossom pavilion closest to the study. According to the gossip of the kitchen ladies, the old master's most favored aunt died tragically in the pavilion, and there was also a period of ghost trouble afterwards. Therefore, this place is rarely visited and is the most desolate place in the mansion. The outside is quite desolate, the more you walk inside, the more wrong it becomes. Jiang Xuaning became very cautious, relying on her agile body movements to hide behind a big tree. When will the master finish tonight? It's so cold. Oh, if you get involved with that little fox, you won't be able to finish it until dawn. The 2 attendants outside lowered their voices and yawned and complained. There was a flicker of candlelight in the attic. Jiang Xuaning quietly walked around to the back, without attracting the attention of the 2. "Damn it, sir, you're hurting someone," her charming voice made her feel goosebumps all over her body. "Xiaojiao, your snow-white skin is really tempting. Jiang Xuaning glanced through the crack in the window that had not been closed, her eyes burning. It was Mr. Zhou and Mrs. Shan who were bustling with dragons and phoenixes in the room. The old ox was eating tender grass and the thief was ugly. After seeing the person clearly, she withdrew her gaze and focused on squatting in the corner to listen to the corner of the wall, in order to avoid needlework. Most of them are flirtatious words, and playing with Ganlu after a long drought seems particularly exciting, with both expressions enjoying themselves. She felt drowsy from listening. Do they want to come to your study once? Third young lady coquettishly said, the red sleeves of talented and beautiful women add fragrance. I also want to try it with you, especially since the pens in the study are very useful. Jiang Xuaning was instantly energized when she heard the words, study. This young lady has a unique hobby. Is it really just a coincidence? Madame Sand lowered her voice and coquettishly leaned in Mr. Zhou's ear, talking about the wonderful use of the study in pen. Mr. Zhou gave her a slap and said, Jiao Jiao is really getting better and better. I'll satisfy you, sir. The two of them agreed on a time to go to the study again. After listening to this useful piece of information all night, the rest were either flirting or complaining about Mrs. Zhou treating her poorly. Jiang Xuaning saw that it was almost time and quickly left to return to the firewood shed. Breaking through this matter tonight and making good use of it without compensation is not an opportunity to disrupt the water in the Zhou mansion, which is the only way for her to take advantage of the situation. She reorganized the relationships between the characters in the Zhou family, trying to find a place to start. She quickly waited for the opportunity. The young lady's maid and the third lady's maid fought fiercely in the kitchen over a bowl of bird's nest. In the end, the kitchen manager was also scolded a few times and fined a monthly fee. I heard that both young ladies were scolded. The fighting among the people above has implicated us servants, and we have been working for nothing again this month. So is Madame San. Although she is an illegitimate daughter. In law, she has to argue with Madame de everywhere. Isn't this asking for trouble on her own? You don't know that anymore. The two of them have been at odds for a long time, so it's probably not going to be good for a while. Jiang Xuaning set fire while carefully listening to the love, hate, and feud of the two ladies, as well as the struggle in the room, with her ears wide open. These kitchen ladies and mothers, although unable to enter the inner house. But the kitchen itself is a place full of oil and water, and it doesn't matter who can come here. The servants in the mansion are all related, and they cannot enter, but they have relatives who work as servants around their masters. That's how gossip came about. Jiang Xuaning sifted through these gossips to find useful news. On that day, Zhouju returned to her room dejected after being scolded. As one of the maids of the young lady, she has been increasingly unpopular lately. She felt a deep sense of crisis. The maid was well treated and had face, and many people were watching her position. And she has always been at odds with another big maid. After a fight in the kitchen a few days ago, she made mistakes one after another, and the young lady is already very dissatisfied with her. Autumn Chrysanthemum sighed as she pushed open the door and found a small ball of paper on her bed. She looked around cautiously and carefully opened the note to take a glance. Excited hearts were pounding wildly. If what was on the note was true, it would definitely bring down the third young lady, and she would become the greatest hero. Zhouju stomped her steps back and forth. She wanted to remain calm. Plan carefully and expose it in front of the young lady, taking credit for it. Of course, the note was thrown by Jiang Xuaning. Compared to the owners of the Zhou mansion, she chose a maid as the breakthrough point. A note that appears out of thin air, a master with a bit of brain, will definitely realize it's not right. And a maid who is in a hurry to ascend wouldn't think so much. The Qiuju family is a servant of the Zhou family, with complex relationships among the servants of the Zhou family, filling her gap of lack of connections in the Zhou family. She believed that with Qiuju's ambition, she would definitely make good use of this matter and find a reasonable excuse to expose the matter to the young lady. After throwing away the note, Jiang Xuaning completely hibernated and even went out less frequently at night to avoid startling the snake. On this day, the old lady in charge of night fragrance came over and murmured, saying that she wanted to borrow someone to push night fragrance out tonight. The woman on duty tonight twisted her waist. The steward of the kitchen glanced at Jiang Xuaning and pointed directly to the most honest one, Xiaoju, go and help my sisters. I will give you 2 more pieces of meat for dinner tomorrow. Jiang Xuaning let out an honest hum and followed the mocking eyes of others in the kitchen. She is thin but always works hard, so in the middle of the night, she is arranged to push a car filled with incense from the mansion with another woman and go out to dispose of it for cleaning. Jiang Xuaning was dizzy by her stinky brain, and the taste was too sour and refreshing. Walking to the place dedicated to handling night incense, the old woman glanced at her and pointed to the distant willow tree. You go there and wait for me, she said. She walked over with an "oh" sound and indeed saw Shan Zhaoyan waiting there. I don't know what's wrong with this sick seedling, so I chose this fecal-smelling joint method. Chapter 7. Explosive Scandal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shan Zhaoyan looked at her coming and said disdainfully, stop, you'd better keep a 3-step distance from me. Jiang Xuaning smiled slightly and took a big step forward before stumbling and falling onto him. Shan Zhaoyan was agile and wanted to dodge. She quickly grabbed his belt and steadily leaned under his nose. If you don't want your paws, I can stamp them for you. Shan Zhaoyan felt extremely disgusted and felt that he was not clean. Jiang Xuaning wiped his clean clothes with her own hands and let go, still feeling unsatisfied. How could the crown prince be like a yellow flower girl? It's not a joke, she said. He really wants to strangle her. Shan Zhaoyan reluctantly suppressed the fierce aura between his eyebrows and eyes. The January period is approaching, how is the situation progressing? Jiang Xuaning lazily leaned against the tree and said, if nothing unexpected happens, the hour of high in 2 days will be a good time to take action. What if there is an accident? Shan Zhaoyan cleverly retorted. Jiang Xuaning casually folded a willow twig and played with it in her hand, then let's mix the scallions with tofu. Shan Zhaoyan, speak human language. Cold salad. Shan Zhaoyan's eyes exploded with coldness. If you can't do it, go feed maggots in this night's fragrant pond. He is quite good at disgusting people. Jiang Xuaning gave him a bright smile and said, before that, I guarantee that your wall grass is already 3 meters tall. The two fought each other, wishing to kill each other with their eyes. Finally, Xiao Shi bravely stood up and coordinated with her on the action plan for that night. He didn't understand why the usually noble and aloof crown prince became increasingly angry when he met this little village girl. They finished speaking on their end, and the night fragrance on the other side was also poured out. Jiang Xuaning turned around and left. Shan Zhaoyan looked at her back and felt very unhappy. 2 days later, the maids of the eldest and third young ladies walked back and forth to the kitchen to order. Both young ladies are sick and have been instructed to eat something light and refreshing. The mother and others in the kitchen left and couldn't help but mutter, when you're sick, you have a good understanding. Jiang Xuaning lowered her eyebrows and lit her eyes, knowing in her heart that the grand play was about to begin. Today is the traditional lantern festival in Tongzhou, and Mrs. Zhou is going out with her daughter and daughter-in-law to a banquet. The 2 young ladies are sick, so naturally they cannot go. In the evening, the masters of the mansion almost walked half of the way, and the kitchen rarely relaxed. Everyone was tacitly lazy, and the mothers in charge even went home early. Jiang Xuaning also returned to the firewood room, changed into a nightgown, and hid the dagger at her waist. As time approached, she sneaked into a location near the study where she had already stepped on and hidden it. The night was getting deeper and deeper, and the third young lady, who was supposed to be recuperating in the room, was supported by a maid and entered the peach blossom pavilion with her beautiful branches. About half an hour later, the young lady appeared in front of the peach blossom pavilion with several tall women and trusted maids. She looked up at the courtyard door, her eyes filled with hidden hatred. Dog men and women, let's bury her unborn child. A year ago, even though it was the little slut who planned her miscarriage and provided complete evidence, her father-in-law forced the matter down and only punished her with half a year of confinement. The doctor said she will forever lose the qualification to be a mother. The young lady decisively pushed open the door and said, "Go in." Jiang Xuaning hid in a flower ridge surrounded by vines and stared at her. This lady was indeed someone who could spare no effort. Ah! Ah! The sharp cry quickly pierced through the night sky and penetrated deeply. Mr. Zhou, who had been exposed by the ugly incident, was about to kill someone with his sword. The young lady ran out of the peach blossom pavilion with a pale expression. She is a young lady from a military family, and her body is much stronger than that of ordinary women in the brothel. I saw her running out and howling, "Help, my father-in-law wants to kill me and silence me. I'm going to catch someone else, not intentionally discovering my father-in-law and siblings. Please spare my life, my father-in-law. I promise not to reveal the matter." Madame de Xiao is also a talented person, running and howling at the same time. When she reaches the gate, the whole mansion will know about this matter. Mr. Zhou was only wearing a middle coat, with a fierce anger and a murderous expression on his face. He insisted on killing her tonight. Unfortunately, imagination is beautiful, reality is cruel. As people were about to catch up, the door suddenly opened. After watching the lanterns and attending the banquet, Mrs. Zhou was startled by the sight in front of her as soon as she walked in. "What are you doing?" The young lady rushed behind her with a quick and urgent tone, "Mother, I really didn't mean to. I went tonight to catch my husband and the maid in the room. I didn't expect my father-in-law and third younger sister to do that kind of thing in the Peach Blossom Pavilion. I know I was wrong. My father-in-law is going to kill me. Mom, please help me." The young lady cried uncontrollably, and Mrs. Zhou's body shook and almost fainted. Madame de Xiao firmly supported her from behind, but she couldn't faint now. Mr. Zhou roared angrily, "You step aside, I'll kill her." "My little peach has already returned to the Xiang family to report," Mrs. De shouted. Mr. Zhou suddenly calmed down. The young lady is the daughter of the general of Tongzhou and has always been favored. If he kills her, the Xiang family will not give up easily. Mrs. Zhou almost gritted her teeth and instructed the grandmother behind her, "Bring me that little slut." She then sneered at Mr. Zhou and said, "Master, please calm down and think carefully about how to explain to your son." Mr. Zhou's eyes flickered. He was just an illegitimate son, and what qualifications did he have to confess? Moreover, his good son had already been well aware of this matter. Due to such an incident, Mrs. Zhou became arrogant, and all the servants in the study in Peach Blossom Pavilion were forcefully ordered to be interrogated in the main room. Zhang Zongbing quickly came knocking on the door with his 4 ferocious sons. Old Zhou was too preoccupied and the entire Zhou mansion was in chaos due to this scandal. The defense of the study room becomes chaotic at once, and this is the best time. Jiang Xuaning quickly launched an attack, following the points she had stepped on before, entering the Peach Blossom Pavilion through the dog hole in the desolate corner of the wall, and then flipping into the study from the Peach Blossom Pavilion. At this moment, the study was extremely quiet and dark. She quickly inspected the study and found nothing. How could this be? At this moment, footsteps rang out, and the person forcibly taken away by Mrs. Zhou for questioning returned. Jiang Xuaning moved her ears and judged from the footsteps that the person returning was someone who knew martial arts. She dared not startle the snake and quickly retreated. Although it is important to receive the promise of the powerful crown prince of the Xiangue mansion, small destiny is even more important. Her current strength does not allow her to be tough, so she turned back and entered the Peach Blossom Pavilion. The Peach Blossom Pavilion is in chaos, and people around Mrs. Zhou have come to search. She simply hid in the attic on the top floor. Where would the things be if they were not in the study, the bedroom, and the dowry storage room? Shen Zhaoyan's people have checked, but there is still no trace of the ledger. Chapter 8. Death Again. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. There was not much time left for her, and Jiang Xuening calmly reviewed everything in her mind, trying not to miss any clues. Madame Shan mentioned that she would get involved with Mr. Zhou because she was wronged and accidentally entered the Peach Blossom Pavilion, where she met Mr. Zhou. Mr. Zhou comforted him and finally comforted him in bed. Wait, this is not right. According to people's accounts, Peach Blossom Pavilion is the most ominous and unlucky place in the mansion. Why did Madame Shan meet Mr. Zhou here? Jiang Xuening's eyes lit up, and the most dangerous place was the safest. Similarly, the most desolate and ominous place may be the most likely one. The closest study to here may just be a cover-up. The arrangement of those guards not only makes people feel that the study is a secret hiding place, but also can confuse the enemy. It can also cover the Peach Blossom Pavilion while protecting it. After all, the study room is not far from the Peach Blossom Pavilion, and any movement or stillness can be immediately detected. Jiang Xuening stood up and could only treat the dead horse as a living horse doctor and give it a try. The voices below were noisy, so she had to start looking from here. The attic is empty and can be seen at a glance. She began to inspect the walls to see if there were any hidden mechanisms. Sweeping the whole room, her gaze fixed on the tattered vase in the corner of the wall. Jiang Xuening walked over to move the vase and knocked on the green brick on the ground with her hand, which was indeed a trick. She quickly pried open the blue brick with a small knife, and below it was indeed hollow, revealing a mechanism. The things are hidden secretly enough, and she can see at a glance that they are mechanisms of Mahist school. It can only be said that the Zhou family had bad luck this time and met her. She studied and quickly twisted the mechanism, and a hidden grid appeared on the wall. Inside was a mechanism box. Jiang Xuening spent half a pillar of incense time, opened the mechanism box, obtained the account book and list, restored everything to its original state, and quietly left. No matter how noisy the mansion is, Xiang still pours out. Jiang Xuening held her breath and came to the side of the night incense car. The old lady gave her a cold look and said, "Here we go." They went out through the back door, unobstructed. Xiao Shi, who was hiding with someone nearby, breathed a sigh of relief when he saw her coming out. "Quickly retreat," he said, still meeting in the same place. Jiang Xuening walked over with a cold face, feeling utterly unattainable by the stench. Shen Zhaoyan was finally willing to look at her with a straight eye and said, "Did you get the things?" Jiang Xuening took out the things hidden in the night incense cart and handed them over with ease. "That's called a fragrant aroma. Shen Yan is not feeling well all over now, and he will spit it out in the next second." Jiang Xuening raised her eyebrows and said, "If the crown prince doesn't want it, I'll throw it away." Shen Zhaoyan pressed down on the discomfort in his stomach and took it over. "Did you mean it?" "If I did it intentionally, I wouldn't just put it in the car, but directly in the night fragrance bucket." Jiang Xuening continued to disgust him. Shen Zhaoyan flipped through the ledger and list with a numb expression on his face. Fortunately the things were real. A wild girl who grew up in the countryside is a bit too powerful. To avoid suspicion, could you please go back to the Zhou mansion and die again? Shen Zhaoyan said rudely. Jiang Xuening narrowed her eyes, and now she wants him to go see the king of hell. Oh, the crown prince probably doesn't want to cross the river and demolish the bridge, pushing me out to replace the dead ghost and run away on his own. She looked at him with a disdainful expression. Shen Zhaoyan naturally disdained calculating a wild girl like this. He coldly said, "I'll give you 3 days from Zhou. The Zhou government has escaped, and there is no time for it." After speaking, he turned around and left with his people. Jiang Xuening lowered her eyes and planned how to die again in a reasonable way. Every day in the Zhou mansion, it was like singing a grand opera, starting with the third young lady's search for life and death. Another disagreement from General Wang resulted in Mr. Zhou being beaten up and shouting for his daughter to divorce. The masters of this matter are in a state of anxiety, while the servants are enjoying themselves. The kitchen is filled with joy, and everyone's mouths never stop when they're not working. Jiang Xuaning could sense some clues. In her opinion, the Xiang family's posture was more like taking the opportunity to clear ties with the Zhou family. Sure enough, on the day when she finally gathered all the herbs through Lady Xiang, Lady de Xiao left the Zhou family with her dowry and Li Shu. The situation has temporarily calmed down, and of course, the Zhou family is bleeding profusely. They paid a lot of money before the Jiang family could relax and leave under the pretext of emotional discord. Jiang Xuaning knew she couldn't procrastinate. The matter was about to end, and the Zhou family would soon find out that something was not there. She sneaked back to the woodshed during lunchtime. I chewed several herbs with a bowl of cold water. It quickly took effect and started to heat up in the afternoon, fainting directly in the kitchen. The kitchen steward said disdainfully, "It will cause trouble. 2 people will help her back to the firewood room. She is the lowest level servant, and if she falls ill, she is not qualified to hire a doctor, and no one will take care of her." At night, another little girl came to call her for dinner, only to find that she had run out of breath. She was immediately scared and shouted loudly, running back to the kitchen, "She seems to be dead. These past few days, my head has been burning with anger, and the kitchen manager doesn't want to use this kind of thing to touch the mold. I'll go tell the steward, let's take them out and throw them away," he said. Jiang Xuaning was once again wrapped in a straw mat to resist and was thrown directly at the mass grave. When the people from Zhou Mansion left, Xiao Shi jumped out and picked her up. Xiao Shi threw her directly into Baiju's room. Baiju gave her a pulse, ordered someone to boil a bowl of medicine for her to drink, and then found the acupoints to give her a few injections. Jiang Xuaning quickly woke up and struggled to get up from the ground. "Are you satisfied with the way I died this time, the crown prince?" Shen Zhaoyan gave her a cold glance and said, "Go wash yourself clean before you talk to me. I don't want to be stinked to death by you." Jiang Xuaning felt like she was almost becoming a ninja turtle and limped off to take a shower. She was also quite uncomfortable with the scent of medicine mixed with the smell of corpse decay on her body. Baiju exclaimed with great interest, "This little girl is quite capable of tinkering around. The medicine she made herself is just right." Shen Zhaoyan pondered, is she really just a little girl who has been honing herself in the countryside? He had long been suspicious of her, and in this operation, if Jiang Xuaning showed any signs of dissent, he would have gone to see Duke Zhou long ago. "Didn't you check it out? Her identity is not a problem." Baiju thought she was quite interesting. Perhaps the descendants of the Gu family have a strong bloodline. Especially for women from the Gu family, they are all ruthless characters. Shen Zhaoyan didn't know what was on his mind, and his eyes softened slightly. "You're right, after all, it's that woman's cousin," he said. "If it's too useless, it's strange. What are you going to do with her?" Baiju asked. "If we follow Shen Zhaoyan's previous style, he is likely to kill people and silence them. The noble and cold crown prince of Kyoto is actually a ruthless ruler, not as glamorous as he appears on the surface. Take it with you, observe first." Shen Zhaoyan's tone was somewhat regrettable. Chapter 9. How could the Empress be her? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jiang Xuaning took a hot bath, changed into clean clothes, and was taken into Shen Zhaoyan's study. There is a glass lamp shining in the study, and the man under the lamp, by Zixing Shui, has a dust-free expression on his eyebrows and eyes, with a pair of eyes soaked in cold air, emitting a sense of aloofness. The appearance is truly beautiful, but unfortunately, the character is fundamentally bad. Jiang Xuaning walked over and sat down on the chair without any formalities. "The crown prince owes me one." Shen Zhaoyan looked at her coldly without refuting, and asked, "What are your plans next?" "Of course, I'm going back to Jiangnan to greet my biological father and stepmother." A bloodthirsty light flashed in her eyes, killing her aunt and cousin. Don't think it's just that. I'm going back to Beijing. The Empress's birthday is next month, Shen Zhaoyan said. Jiang Xuanning didn't hesitate or be surprised. Then let's meet in Kyoto. The Crown Prince is waiting for me to come and collect the debt. I will pass through Jiangnan and then return to Kyoto from Jiangnan. Shen Zhaoyan said a seemingly ambiguous sentence, as if he was mute and no longer spoke. Just a pair of cold eyes looking at her like quenched ice, cold air overflowing. Jiang Xuanning tentatively asked, "Does the Crown Prince mean we are going together?" Shen Zhaoyan let out a cold, Jiang Xuanning rolled her eyes, truly capable of pretending to be a man's heartfelt needle. She was not too tired to be guessed halfway through her speech. She had already reviewed the list in advance, and it seemed that the Xiao family was involved, which made her slightly worried. She couldn't help but ask, "Is the Xiao family related to this matter?" Shen Zhaoyan sneered, "It doesn't matter, even the Xiao family can't collapse. Is it possible that within 3 years, the Xiao family has already gained immense power?" Jiang Xuanning's face was full of confusion. Why? Shen Zhaoyan didn't doubt her this time. After all, she was trapped in the countryside for 3 years and didn't know that things in Chaotang and Kyoto were normal. The daughter of the Xiao family is an empress, and for the sake of the authority of the royal family, the emperor will not easily lower the face of the Xiao family. Before the words could be finished, Jiang Xuanning stood up suddenly, her chair falling to the ground in a hurry. She urgently asked, "What is the name of the queen?" After waking up from being reborn at the mass grave, one thing after another, she lacked the energy and did not find a suitable opportunity to carefully inquire about the situation in the capital. Shen Zhaoyan looked at her overreaction with a slightly deep gaze and said, "The Empress's name is Xiao Shujin." Jiang Xuanning's ears were buzzing, almost biting through the tip of her tongue, and her voice was inexplicably sad. "Say it again, what's the name of the Empress?" Those eyes were filled with endless desolation and despair. Shen Zhaoyan looked at them with shock and slowed down his voice. "The current Empress is Xiao Shujin, the eldest daughter of the Xiao family. The two empresses have a deep affection for each other." "What a empress with deep affection!" Jiang Xuanning covered her chest and took a half step back, feeling a bloody smell in her mouth as her qi and blood surged. She forcefully suppressed the fishy sweetness in her throat and asked word by word, "What is the position of being late?" "Zhenguifei, meaning the treasure in the emperor's heart." Shen Zhaoyan answered to her, taking in all her anomalies. Jiang Xuanning pulled out a smile that was even worse than crying and said, "It's getting late. I'll go back to my room and rest first." Shen Zhaoyan stared at her tightly clenched left hand, his expression dim and unclear. The reaction to the queen was so strong that there was indeed something wrong with her. Jiang Xuanning returned to her room and closed the door. She couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of old blood. She wiped the blood from her mouth expressionlessly, like a soulless puppet. Qi Fiwen is the reason why He Lianxuan abandoned her, and it is the well-protected white moonlight that has always been hidden behind the scenes. She had already known this fact before her death. Lianxian was too skilled in acting and spent 7 years carefully weaving a lie for her. She's dead, so it's not too late. This true love should have risen to power openly. But just now Shen Zhaoyan told her that the Empress of Lianxian is Xiao Shujin. That is her best intimate friend from childhood to adulthood. Outsiders may not know the truth about her tragic death 3 years ago, and Xiao Shujin cannot be unaware. But she became the queen of Lianxian. At the moment Jiang Xuanning heard this news, she felt her heart being crushed again. It was a good friend of her sister's, a bosom friend who grew up with her and walked through ups and downs together. But after marrying a man who wiped out her family, Jiang Xuanning slowly slid against the door and sat on the ground, with her head down and no tears in her eyes, but her heart was dripping with blood. What exactly is true? Why are you all lying to me? A hoarse and suppressed voice, words sobbing and blood echoing in the night. Love is fake, friendship is fake, only the blood of the Gu family is real. They stepped on the bodies of the Gu family and her, sitting in the highest position with deep affection for the emperor and empress. There is nothing more ironic than this. Looking back on the past, Jiang Xuaning took care of Xiao Shujin, who stayed up all night when she was sick. She was injured, and Xiao Shujin's eyes turned red with tears. In order to save her, Hellion Xian bowed step by step and knelt over 1,000 steps, devoutly seeking medical treatment for her in front of the Buddha. The bits and pieces of the past flashed clearly in her mind. It was not that she was too foolish, but that people were too fickle. It was that they were too skilled in acting. Perhaps from the beginning, she and the Gu family fell into the enemy's carefully woven trap and were doomed. He Lianchuan spent a full 7 years, gradually gaining recognition from her and the Gu family. Xiao Shujin has known her for more than 10 years and has always been her most intimate and gentle sisters. If you can't see through someone for such a long time, it can only be said that people's hearts are too scary. The pain of Jiang Xuaning's smile was not that she and the Gu family were blind, but that they were too good at playing with people's hearts and using such a long time to lure them step by step into the trap. Looking back on the whole thing, she only felt a chill on her spine. I like to play with people's hearts, right? Jiang Xuaning said with a cold expression in her eyes. I will take out your hearts and crush them again. She slowly stood up against the wall, her eyes suddenly turned cold, and she pushed open the door, holding a dagger and attacking. Shen Zhaoyan quickly retreated and easily blocked her attack with a fan. What are you going crazy about? Your Highness, the Crown Prince, actually likes to listen to the corners of the wall, Jiang Xuaning sneered. Shen Zhaoyan's expression remained unchanged. Oh, I'm just here to tell you that Xiao Wuji has become a palace guard with a sword. Jiang Xuaning's expression became even colder as she rescued the abandoned son of the Xiao family from the wolf pack. Very good, I betrayed her completely and without leaving any illusions for her. You're bleeding from the corner of your mouth. Shen Zhaoyan coldly withdrew his gaze and turned away, his eyes full of playfulness. At the age of 13, he showed great intelligence and a fierce reaction to the affairs of the Xiao family. Oh, things are getting more and more interesting. Jiang Xuaning clenched the knife in her hand, and Shen Zhaoyan, who was full of inner thoughts, must have suspected her. She was thinking about the chance of rushing up now and getting rid of him. Finally, she glanced at the moonlight and calmly turned back to her room. If she dares to take action, the hidden guards in the dark will immediately flock forward. Doubt it. As long as she doesn't tear her face apart, she should continue to cling on. She wants to keep her life and return to Kyoto for revenge. Chapter 10. Gorgeous Crossdressing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text.